Were you at Much when they first started, like day one?
No, I was there a couple years after.
Uh-huh.
And so I was working in Vancouver with Doug and the Slugs and Headpins and Trooper, and I'd just come back from the Whitesnake Slide It In Tour 84 of Europe. And I went to see the movie Spinal Tap and walked out of it thinking, okay, that was a little too close for comfort.
Yeah.
And Much had been on the air for a couple of years at that point, and they were sending cameras off across, I should say camera out across the country to try and be the nation's music station, even though they were broadcasting from Toronto.
Uh-huh.
So I met John Martin and all the people at Much because I was trying to get my bands on their air. And they pulled me back, and I started off at Much Music as the host of Rock Flash. Mm-hmm.
What was Rock Flash? I don't recall that.
Rock Flash was the every hour on the hour, I would do a 2-minute segment, and the graphic looked like something out of the Flintstones. It had a big lightning bolt. You know, we always had the best graphics at Much Music at the beginning, and I'd come up with some news every 2 hours. And of course, we didn't have the internet or. So it was all done by the phone, and it had to be new every hour too, because our conceit at Much Music, which often proved to be true, was that people would watch for 8 hours at a time, and sometimes they did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then you hosted the New Music.
Yes, so started at the New Music, yeah.
Man, that was a fascinating show because of what it did. It introduced you to new music.
Yeah. And it was different. I mean, it was one of the first music magazine shows in the world, and partly the reason why it was syndicated internationally. So so it started with Jeannie Becker and J.D. Roberts, and then Daniel Richler and Laurie Brown. And when Daniel went to the CBC, John Martin put me in at the New Music, and it was what a ride, a roller coaster, rock and roll ride, fun.
I have not read your book yet because, unfortunately, they didn't send it to me.
You got one immediately.
However,
I'll have someone disciplined.
Off with their heads.
Off with their heads.
You talk about a lot of different people that you've worked with over the industry, people in the industry and people in the broadcast industry. I'm thinking you had to sit down with like a whole litany of lawyers before you put anything pen to paper.
There were a few lawyers. Yes, the book's been lawyered. But it's not because I was being malicious about anything or telling, horrible kiss and tell stories. But it was really because when you run big companies like Sony or even at CBC, it is de rigueur to have confidentiality clauses. So what's proprietary information, what's confidential information. So I didn't want to run afoul of that. There's I still want to have lunch in this town one day. But it's funny anyway, even without telling all those crazy stories.
Yeah. Who was the weirdest person you ever interviewed?
The weirdest? Oh.
And in sort of like off the wall, it's like, where is this going?
Oh, Tom Waits.
Oh, yeah.
Tom Waits. And I interviewed him a number of times. And, Hunter S. Thompson, he was good too.
I interviewed him once.
Ooh. Well,
nice man, though.
Nice man.
Nice man.
But the crazy story about Hunter was he didn't want to do, he had a new book or something, and he didn't want to do any interviews because his publicist relayed, he thinks if he had $20 for every stupid question he was ever asked. So we decided we're going to give him, I showed up at the interview with a stack of 20s. And the whole idea was if I asked a stupid question, he could take a 20. And if he had a stupid answer, I could take a 20. And we actually didn't get to the money part because he tended to disappear a lot. It was on the roof of the Park Plaza here in Toronto, and he'd disappear for 10 minutes, and then he'd come back up. And it got to the point with that interview, I thought we had to subtitle him because it was so hard to understand.
I interviewed him when I was at CFNY. He showed up, and he's got this, it was way late, and he's got this flask, beautiful leather, handcrafted leather whiskey flask. And he says, I got some beautiful blend of scotch here. You want some? And I said, yeah, what the hell, why not?
Sure.
Poured me some, and I drank it, and I'm thinking, am I an idiot? It took me like 12
There
seconds.
couldn't be anything in there.
Exactly. What a stupid move that was. It was fine. Do you enjoy that kind of interviewing versus the kind of interviewing that you did when you were in the other part of the industry, which is within Sony, where you're interviewing people for the purposes of assisting their careers?
I mean, it's all different, right? I mean, I love doing the interviews at Much Music and the New Music, and I hated being on air, but I loved doing the research, and I loved editing an interview. I'd stay up all night in an editing bay and not know if it was dusk or dark when I'd walk out in the morning. So that part was fascinating, and it's a blessing and a privilege, right? When you can actually sit down nose to nose with an artist that you admire greatly and actually have a connection with them. It's a very privileged place to be. Later on, it was, interviewing people for jobs, and my surprise going to Sony was that part of the reason I went there was because I thought at Much Music the artists are walking in virtually fully formed, right? The record's done, they've got a video already, the tour is probably being announced. And I was really interested and energized by the idea of finding brand new artists and starting, just at the bottom and, helping and nurturing and celebrating and marketing them. But I think 5% of my time was spent on that as president of the company.
How important was it that you were the first female president at Sony?
I'm not sure it was important. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, I talk a lot about the imposter syndrome in the book. Well, not a lot, but there's a few pages on it. And I think many women who, get to hold positions of authority, many of them admit to having the imposter syndrome. And so it was difficult for me.
Which is?
It's when you don't think someone's going to find out you're just faking it all along, right? When you don't believe you're worthy of it, and more men are owning up to it now.
I think
are you
we've
gonna
all
own
gone.
up?
Yeah, 42 years later, I think it's a little too late, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but can be a motivating thing. So for me, not only did I walk into Sony Music Canada, which is a fantastic company, right at the beginning of Napster. So it was literally like the rug was pulled out of us. Out from under us. So the business started to collapse. And so you were suddenly learning a new business at the same time trying to reinvent an old one. And, I would go to my international meetings and there would be, all the presidents of other countries, France and Germany and Latin America, they're all men. And, people would ask me, did you lean in, Denise? Did you lean in? I was like, I was leaning so far across the table, my feet were off the ground.
Denise Donlon, I guess, her autobiography called Fearless as Possible Under the Circumstances.
Parenthetically.
Yes, parenthetically. We'll back with more in a moment. It's 1:42 Newstalk 1010.